Okay, so this used to be a format I did a long time ago where I would basically look at articles or videos and give some sort of deep analysis and interpretation on it. These people are clearly qualified to have an opinion, unlike me, because I haven't actually seen it and I don't really care one way or another, but it's like you're trying to discredit criticism. Other series and things don't get this kind of treatment, right? Like, there are plenty of things which are largely disliked. So why does this get special interpretation on articles written about it to try to qualify? Well, it's not just people disliking it because they dislike it. It's because of some other special reason or some disqualifier that they want to use. This is actually a horrible picture to portray what we're about to see represented in the article, because it's saying, like, this person watched it for 6,000 hours. This person watched it for 1,000 hours, apparently. Right, unless maybe these two imply it's the same person doing it, like he's botting or whatever. But then that's a separate issue too that could happen for positive reviews too. You get, like bombed the same way. Clearly, at least these people have seen it for long periods of time, assuming I don't know what this is actually. The series wouldn't even be that long. So, right, you watch the same episodes over and over for 1,000 hours, but whatever. The point is, let's actually go through this. It's just so preconceived and slanted. Like, I haven't done one of these in a long time, but I just saw this somehow in passing and it triggered me so much because it's so stupid. Review bombing is a problem. Okay, so again, even just trying to define the term, it's like people can't just dislike something, or even if they do bomb it, they must dislike it to be able to do that. But let's read through. Surfing the internet over Labor Day weekend as one does, which is, I unfortunately saw this fucking stupid ass article and I did that. When keeping tabs on the entertainment industry, one news article stuck out like a sore thumb. Forbes, among other outlets, reported that Amazon's Prime Video opted to temporarily disable user ratings for new streaming users series Rings of Power. So that's the real story. Is like, why would they do that? Why would they assert their power over IMDb or whatever? They own all the influence that they have. See, if it was me, like I'm a new creator and I make my first movie or show, if it gets a lot of dislikes, I don't get to hide behind that. People would just say, "Oh, it just sucks. This person sucks. They're not going to make anything else, and your career's over." But because they put so much money, because they have so much influence, that shouldn't change the way it's interpreted. The option would not be available for 72 hours following the release of new episodes. Why? What possible justification could you have for that? And again, I'm always one who's like, I don't really take those things seriously anyway. I could see something that has negative views. I kind of had like a 25% radius that I would work around, right? So if it's like a 75 rated movie on Metacritic or whatever, I'd still consider it. But if it's like a 20, right, 20 out of 100, 2 out of 10, then you can say, okay, there's a little bit of room for variance, but I don't take it as an absolute. So a 10 out of 10 doesn't mean it's going to be perfect, and a 7 out of 10 doesn't mean it's going to be bad. Right, you keep it within that range. But then beyond 30 or 40 points, it's like, sure, there might be room for error, but I'll take the benefit of the doubt and say it's probably not worth checking out. But there are always disagreements, like Signs, I think. Let me look. Signs. A lot of people didn't like this, and it gets questionable reviews, right? So this is one of my favorite movies ever, one that I said is like one of the best screenplays ever written, because I used to rank movies and stuff, and so it was like, this was a top 100 script, as far as I'm concerned. It only gets a 59, and it only gets even a 7.4, but it's one of my favorite movies, so it's not going to influence my willingness to watch something or whatever. So you can see past it. You shouldn't take it as an absolute, but the fact that you shouldn't take it as an absolute means that it shouldn't be censored even all the more, because if that's the case, then who cares if it gets disliked a lot? People can still watch it if they like it, so what's the problem? So if it does matter, then don't remove them. And if it doesn't matter, don't remove them either, because you don't have to take them seriously. You can take them with a grain of salt. Amazon could just say, oh, well, people are trolls, and so they're disliking it. Okay, fine, but then don't remove that. Right? People have the right to troll, even if that's what you want to call it. Amazon, like so many other platforms and creators before it, has come face to face with the reality of review bombing. Like, this is some major age-long issue that really... Okay. And again, even if that's true, all those other instances that you're referring to, whatever they might be, I can think of a few maybe examples, but they didn't get an article dedicated to them. They didn't get to censor a platform like IMDb. They didn't get to do all this. So why do they get this privilege when the other companies didn't? The assumption would just be those things got dislikes because they suck. And this is part of the reason why also YouTube removed dislikes as well, right? They want the praise, they want the likes, which you can still see, but they don't want the other stuff. They don't want any sort of legitimate criticism. As such, the company deemed it prudent to protect the reputation of its shiny new creation. That's true, you're showing their bias, but then this person is very biased themselves. And again, I haven't even seen it. I'm not even that big a fan of the subject matter, so I could care less. I don't have an opinion on it. Maybe it's great, right? That doesn't matter whether it's good or not, but let people at least have their say. And if it's so good, then the dislikes aren't going to have an impact, right? But then again, people are mindless sheep who kind of go by stuff like that. They'll see the dislikes and then they'll dislike too. So I disagree with that pattern as well, right? Like if I was interested, I would still watch it in the subject matter and whatnot, and I would come to my own opinion, as if the current status of traditional critics wasn't complicated already. What is review bombing? So this whole thing is written from a perspective that you don't fucking know anything and you're a complete moron. So he's going to tell you what to think, but if you have a brain, what is it? Why does it occur? Most importantly, is it the collective act of review bombing a movie, TV show, or game so potent at sullying a product's reputation as to necessitate countermeasures? But again, the only reason why it would get so many dislikes, again, how many people are really dedicated to just do it for the sake of doing it? Like, if there's a large fan base who enjoys it, you would think it would get a lot of positive reviews from that too, so that would counteract the negative. So at worst, it should be like a 6 or a 7 out of 10. Unless nobody likes it and everyone dislikes it, or maybe people just don't care about ratings in general. Let's discuss it diplomatically as possible. These aren't real bombs, are they? Haha, treating you like an idiot, which you would be if you read a fucking stupid article like this. Thankfully, no. Society has not tipped over to the point where actual warfare is waged because of the perceived lack of quality about the latest Jurassic World installment. Granted, the nomenclature has a dramatic ring to it. Then again, wherever review bombing is practiced, it's typically because heavy drama hangs in the air. In a nutshell, and explained by many, many other websites, unfortunately, I'm not going to have an aneurysm trying to read those too. The act of review bombing is when a group of like-minded, okay, now read this one, like-minded in online users of a platform, IMDb, YouTube, Rotten Tomatoes, etc. Apparently YouTube, you can still do it, but you can't see it. And there are apps to still be able to see it, like third-party extensions and stuff, Steam, etc. So just look at this line. Like-minded individuals. Maybe they're like-minded in their dislike for the particular thing in question, meaning they all share the opinion that it's not good. Decide in concert. Maybe they don't decide in concert. Maybe they just say, this is trash, I don't like it, I'm going to show my dislike for it. But what is this concert? Do they go on Discord? Do they have a Reddit where they say, hey, today we decide to just dislike this thing that we haven't even seen or that we don't even know what it is? That's a fair thing. Like if you say, a lot of people haven't even watched it and they dislike it just to join in on the hype of disliking it, fine. But there's no way to even prove that. And again, you can always just say that, oh, people are just doing it, but it doesn't mean you have to censor it. Decide in concert. So there are two things to question about this statement. Like-minded, so why does it matter if they're like-minded? Like they don't like the product, so they're voicing their opinion. So that doesn't discredit them. And then decide in concert is debatable because how are they really doing it? What, you think millions of people are somehow in contact with each other having this scheme over the keyboard, oh, we're going to really stick it to Amazon here. This drags the overall score down because people didn't like it. It can be a movie like Godzilla vs. Kong's early experience, a TV show as in the case of The Rings of Power, or video games. It isn't as simple as intentionally dumping on a given product because its quality is deemed subpar. But what other reason? Battlefield Earth is just terrible. See, that's his opinion. So now Battlefield Earth was disliked, bombed. You could say it's unfair. Why didn't Battlefield Earth get defense and treatment? People must have just disliked it because they have some bias or whatever. Like I tried to discredit their opinion, but no, they don't get that treatment, but this does. You didn't question it then. As intentionally dumping on a given product because its quality is deemed subpar. I'd love to hear what other reasons, and they're very stupid. Generally, there's more, let's say, ideologically motivated subterfuge at play. The driving point here is that the overall score resulting from the practice is no longer a reflection of the public's opinion of its quality, which is what the score should reflect. Now, that's a very self-righteous way to look at it, but arguably, it's never reflected just that, right? It could reflect a lot of different things. People will like something just because their favorite celebrity's in it, not because it's really a good piece of work, or they'll dislike it because they just hate the lead actor, or there was some production issue with it. That was always a part of ratings, right? They don't like the fact that Roman Polanski was, a criminal, so they might dislike one of his movies for that. It shouldn't reflect that, you're right, but that's always been a part of it, so either you remove it for all time or you take that with a grain of salt. That's the key phrase here. Take it with a grain of salt, that don't take it as an absolute, the rating, but you can consider all those things in there. It's influenced by a vocal minority. That's questionable that it's a minority. If it's a minority, this wouldn't be an issue because, again, if millions of people are watching it, maybe millions of people don't rate it, but how could a minority cause this much of a problem then? On one hand, it's bombing. On the other hand, it's a minority. Make up your mind. mind. Disagreement with what it deems to be no more than annoying, if not insulting, socio-political brownie points the product earns to strive. Now, this sometimes people hide behind. It might not even be about that. Maybe it's just not entertaining. How do you know this is their motivation? Again, he's projecting so much onto them, like he's reading their minds. You don't know that's why they didn't like it. That could be part of it. But also, why isn't that a legitimate form of criticism? It doesn't matter whether, like, so what, you're not allowed to criticize that socio-political aspect? Like, maybe it doesn't fit. Maybe they're forcing it into a subject matter where it doesn't belong. Like, it could be a comedy and it's like, oh, they're making all these great social points that I agree with, but it doesn't belong in a comedy series. That really puts a damper on it. It's not creatively fulfilling, so it's a bad product. So that is, he's trying to discredit anything ideologically motivated, but the creators are the one putting something ideological into it. So it's your choice to say, I don't think that particular thing belongs in the subject matter, or the way that they're using it is not effective for the storytelling. So it is legitimate to, it's not about disagreement. See, you could agree. You could say like, oh, it says racism is bad. Okay, you agree with that, but that has nothing to do with the actual subject matter of the story or making the show any better. So two things can be true. You could even agree with the messaging, but the way that they do it is not effective for its purposes. Legendary example, one that spawned an impressively thorough Vanity Fair article. If he thinks it's impressively thorough, don't look at it. Was for Star Wars The Last Jedi. Now with these, I had an interesting conversation a long time ago, like where if I was the studio people, I would still consider it successful because they all made like $1 billion plus. So I would say it doesn't matter. This would be my defense against what perceived dislike bombing, right? This could be a good example. But again, you wouldn't need to remove the dislikes to do this. They all made over $1 billion. They were very successful. So the studio and the corp and the people behind it are very happy with it, even if a lot of fans, again, this vocal minority, I don't know how much of a minority it is, but evidently a lot of people did see it, and I'm sure at least some people did like it. So regardless of perceived dislike bombing and criticism, it still did very well financially, so you have to at least acknowledge that, like, they were successful products. Now, the irony of that is a lot of people might have seen it just so that they kind of have an opinion on it. Like, at what point do you say you shouldn't give them your money if you think it's going to be bad, but then also you're not qualified to have an opinion unless you see it. So then everybody goes, everybody sees it, and then everybody dislikes it, but it still makes money. And then you keep repeating the process. At some point, you just have to not watch it in the first place. It's like the Asmongold WoW thing. Like, after Wrath, I quit, but he kept playing, and it's like, okay, so you can say, oh, Cataclysm sucks, Mists of Pandaria sucks, all these expansions suck. It's like sequelitis. The more sequels in a series that come out, the worse they on average get. The first couple can be good 1, 2, 3, but by the time you get to part 6, 7, 8, 9, it's going to be garbage anyway. So the point is, you have to consider the fact that you have to just boycott it yourself at one point, or not even boycott, just don't watch it, just don't consume the content, because at some point you get the feeling they're past their prime or it's just not going to be good anymore. If you keep buying into it like, oh, I'm going to go pay to see the movie so I'm qualified to bash it, which is the right way to look at it, you wouldn't be in a position because you haven't even seen it, so that's not fair either. Don't criticize it unless you've seen it, but don't see it if you get this inclination that you don't want to support it because then you're giving them money. So again, those could be considered successful despite the criticism. So I'm almost playing devil's advocate by saying those were good movies. Evidently, I haven't even seen them. Again, no horse in the race, but it's like they were successful financially. There's no denying that. The review bombing for that was heavily inspired by arguments that the filmmakers were more interested in getting politically progressive points across rather than telling a rollicking space operatic adventure. The arguments varied. Now, even if that was true, it could be for a lot of reasons. Maybe just the subject matter, the storytelling isn't good. Maybe it's not faithful to the series, right? That's same thing with the Rings of Power. Like, you could say people are criticizing it maybe for the social angle. People are also criticizing it for the faithfulness to the source material angle. And finally, they're also criticizing it for maybe just the inherent lack of quality. Like, the acting isn't good, the writing isn't good, the storytelling isn't good. All of those are valid. But I like how he tries to say that as though it discredits it. It doesn't. If the filmmakers were more interested in progressive points than actually telling a good story, that's a valid criticism, right? It's not a question of what those points are. It's not a question of the fact that they're there. It's the fact that it's coming at the expense of the storytelling in their perception, which is totally valid, right? If that's the case. So he keeps pointing this socio-political aspect as though it discredits the criticism. That is a valid criticism if they're trying to cram something in there that not only doesn't fit, but also takes away from the storytelling, or at the very least doesn't add to it. It's too obvious that the movie wants to make us all... These are supposedly statements he's taken from other people saying it, but he doesn't actually say who says it. Great writing, by the way. Give credit, at least. It's too obvious that the movie wants to make all the female characters feel the smartest and coolest at the expense of the male counterparts. Okay, that's a valid perception, and I'm tired of this Mary Sue wannabe Jedi Padawan, obviously Rey. Why are all the heroes Latino, Asian, and black? Where's my Luke Skywalker? Etc., etc. It made for curious feedback. Again, you're just singling out random things that you're not even crediting who said that, or he's just imagining it himself. Maybe nobody said any of this, and maybe that's not why. Maybe just the story is stupid. They shouldn't have brought back, spoilers, I at least know that even though I haven't seen it, they shouldn't have brought back Palpatine or whatever. What was of real value and could be used as constructive criticism for the next movie? What was no more than the angry words of stubborn? Apparently they're your words though, because you don't say who said it. And I'm sure there are people who say stuff like that, but there's something more intrinsic about it. It doesn't matter why they dislike it, the end result is they don't like it. And that could apply to everything then. Unreceptive moviegoers, unreceptive. Like, it's your job to be receptive, not just to have the opinion that you naturally have. Who are never going to give the film the time of day, but evidently they must have seen it. Unless they didn't see it, then I agree with you. If they're just criticizing it from the outside, which I wouldn't do. So I'm neither criticizing nor praising the sequel trilogy nor Rings of Power, right? I'm just observing the logical process or the lack of logic in this guy's article. The time of day because it didn't fit with what they wanted in the Star Wars picture, which again would be a valid point, right? It does have an established lore and criteria that people might want it to fit. But it's their fault for expecting something preconceived. Or like on one hand, the studio gets to use the namesake and exploit it, like with maybe Lord of the Rings, people feel that way, but then they don't have to fit into the criteria. It's like what people said about the cursed child. Again, I haven't seen too much of the Harry Potter stuff, so I wouldn't know. But people say, it's very untrue to the source material and the subject matter. Meanwhile, she's a billionaire author and, who gives a shit? She can do whatever she wants. It's her subject matter, but that's still a valid criticism if it betrays the own source material that you created. That's a criticism I've heard of that. Or worse, went against their values. Again, trying to personalize something that doesn't even make sense. Values that come off as antiquated compared to mainstream 21st century Western culture. None of that's relevant to anything. You can always look at fiction in a vacuum. That doesn't have to have any relevance to that. Sometimes one must call a spade a spade. Kelly Marie Tran didn't wipe her Instagram because she grew bored by it. I don't know what that's about. Who cares? It wasn't always about Star Wars. The term review bombing is relatively recent. No one or precious few was using the term maybe even 10 years ago. I haven't heard it be used that much in general either because it's usually just an excuse for quality, right? Like YouTube used it to justify, again, the same way. Like when people don't like something, they dislike it. And that's not acceptable, so we have to stop them from disliking it. They try to discredit why they dislike it, but it doesn't matter. Like, you don't have to explain. That's why thumbs up, thumbs down is so arbitrary, and I kind of agree with it, but that's also take it with a grain of salt and don't take it as an absolute. Roger Ebert said something like that, like thumbs up, thumbs down, or stars and rating numbers are so arbitrary. Just listen to what they say in the review or read it. You don't have to just look at a number and take it for granted. Despite the loud hoopla surrounding the Last Jedi example highlighted above, the online tactic, and it didn't stop it from being successful either. Again, like I said, it made $1 billion, so it doesn't even work. So evidently you could use that to validate it. Say, it was a good movie, therefore, and I'm not saying that, but it did well despite that. The online tactic was more closely associated with video games than movies and TV shows about a decade ago. Furthermore, it wasn't explicitly political, not to say it's exclusively political these days either. I don't think it has to be at all. Again, you could disagree. Two things can be true. You could agree with a point that it's making, but just not feel that it fits with a particular subject matter. The best example would be like a comedy thing. It's a comedy story. You don't want to see all this stuff crammed in that could be serious or, it just has nothing to do with it, what you're looking for. A well-researched 2019, yeah, this guy's vouching for the research level. Look at him. Look at the amount of research he did that he couldn't quote people saying stuff. He just has to say it in quotations. Who said that? Game Rant article elaborates platforms such as Steam and Metacritic were dealing with such instances as far back as 2012. Mass Effect 3 was released. Now, Mass Effect was incredibly successful and people love it. So I guess that's anecdotal people, but it did very well. It appears that the story's conclusion I don't want this to be spoilers either because I haven't finished the series, but didn't sit well with series and the latter shared their feelings online emphatically. But again, the game still did great, so what's the problem? The developers BioWare produced what is called the extended cut sometime later. This reminds me of like the How I Met Your Mother thing where people hated the ending and so they made a little different one. Sometime later, which mildly altered the original ending. BioWare was well within its right to do whatever it pleased with the franchise and to respond to the criticism in whatever manner it saw fit. In doing what it did, a new line had been crossed. A big successful company didn't just listen to harsh criticism, it acted upon it by altering. Yeah, I'm kind of in favor with this point though. It's okay if they just stick by it and say that's the ending we wanted and that's it. But then again, with games, especially, you have a certain amount of choice where like they could at least give you a plot choice ending to do something different. Like in The Last of Us, spoilers, I wish at the end it let you choose, even if it's not canon for the sequel and stuff like that, let me choose whether to give Ellie up to the Fireflies or not to try to make the vaccine. So I would have chosen to give her up. A lot of people wouldn't have, but we were forced into the one ending. So I'm okay with them letting you have that choice, but this is more like a cut thing. That's not a bad point though. Altering the original product. The online reviewers and their ill-tempered reception had changed the game, however, no pun intended. Good one. There are several examples of how developers were verbally pummeled online for a whole variety of reasons. Bethesda was the target in 2015 when it contemplated introducing paid modifications to Elder Scrolls V. Fair criticism, though. Avid gamers surely recall the 2016 episode involving YouTuber PewDiePie and Firewatch developer Campo Santos games that resulted in the former's YouTube being taken down. I don't know what that is either. Die Movie Die. It was around 2016 that review bombing gained prominence with respect to movies. More critically, the nature of the review bombing changed as well. It would be strange if a person railed against a theater for charging them for a movie ticket, but complain about what one perceives to be politically motivated storytelling decisions, and a new can of worms is open. Of course, this is the Ghostbusters thing, which also, again, I haven't seen any of these things, so it's almost like I do take people's word that they're not good, but if I had interest in them, I'd see them anyway. Ghostbusters from 2016, yes, that one. Humor is subjective, and so are ratings, and so are dislikes. So people can dislike for any subjective reason they want, and therefore you can take it with a grain of salt, but you don't get to remove it or discredit it, as this article is trying so hard to do. The same joke will not make 100% of audience in the millions laugh. Full disclosure, the author doesn't think the movie is very funny, passable, nothing special. Nobody cares about what this guy thinks. But what Paul Feig's movie went through, even before coming out, was something else. Yeah, sure, before it comes out, I think is fair, right? Because you're only going off a trailer. It could have turned out to be really good. You can't judge it just by that. But then again, I agree with this. You shouldn't do it before it comes out. You should always see it, or I am against this whole preconceived thing, right? Like they see a trailer, they see the subject matter, the premise, and they don't like it based on that alone. You could still theoretically have done a good job with it. One doesn't need a doctorate to put two and two together here. How on earth can a fully fledged opinion on a movie prior to its release save a film critic walking out of a press screening, a festival, or an advanced screening? Much of the ire was born from the fact that the investigators' paranormal activity were women. That may sound like elementary schoolyard tomfoolery, even when the girls are excluded from the fun of recess dodgeball. But it wasn't. These people were adults, functioning people in the society. But again, is it as simple as just them saying we don't want women in the lead roles, or does it more so feel like they're trying to force it on you? And again, I do agree though with the point of being so critical before. From their tactic was repeated for several movies, driven by various complaints, many of which would leave any level-headed person befuddled. Which is a great way to describe your article here. We have already looked back on The Last Jedi, The Eternals. Haven't seen that either. Wow, I'm on a roll. It's almost like I have good judgment. I just don't watch any of this shit in the first place, so I don't have to worry about it. Stirred the passions of people who weren't keen on seeing a gay superhero. I didn't even know I had that. And so did the past summer's Lightyear. Yeah, that did do pretty badly. I was surprised. I thought it would do better. Captain Marvel received considerable scorn for Brie Larson's persona and socio-political beliefs, but Brie Larson isn't the character in the movie. She's a real person who can do and say whatever she pleases within legal limits, however brilliant or nails against chalkboard grading one thing she is. Her attitude during the press, yeah, like the Amber Heard thing could be a thing. Like, what if she still acted in Aquaman 2, then people would dislike it just because she's in it? That could be a questionable thing. I'm not necessarily in favor of people doing that either, from something outside of the film. Her attitude during the press junket doesn't mean Captain Marvel is awful. It can be critiqued because playing No Doubts, I'm Just a Girl, during a scene in which cosmically superpowered protagonist beats the crap out of heavies who don't stand a chance against her, is a bit lazy. As for the Rings of Power, the comments have ranged from the proposed plot not adhering to Tolkien's text, this was a very contrived thing for him to say too, which is a bit of an odd knife to stab with, given that the showrunners only have appendices to base the script on. You could look at that from the opposite perspective, right? I talked to somebody about this who knows a lot about the series. It's like they don't even have the rights to it, and so they're using just the appendices from Return of the King, I guess. Well, who told them to do that? Like, oh, woe is them, $1 billion company that doesn't have the rights to make a show that they want to make and milk it for money. So they don't have the rights necessarily to the full thing they want to make, so they use the rights that they have for Return of the King. That's their choice, so Why is that? So you're not allowed to criticize their it reminds me of something somebody said about Dragon Ball Super's animation. They're like, oh, well, you should feel bad for the animators. They're on the clock. They're working 12 hours a day. They work in terrible conditions. How can you criticize the animation? That's so horrible. Meanwhile, Dragon Ball is such a multi-million-dollar value franchise. You can't afford to plan that out better for a show that's expected to be so successful and that has such a great pedigree. You can't plan out the production of it better. So we're supposed to feel bad for the labor that you fail to manage properly and force people to, again, work in a way that people are sympathetic towards. So we're feeling bad for the big company that's cutting corners to make a product that is subpar, to the fact that the author wouldn't have approved of there being black Harfoots. Again, it could just be a simple subject matter thing. It doesn't matter about, you just fit with the universe. That's all. Lord of the Rings features people of different races, men, dwarves, elves, which is why it doesn't matter. It's all made up. It's not real, so it doesn't matter. Coming together to fight evil, but who knows? Maybe Tolkien was the most racist person. Okay, dude. Chap has been dead for 49. Okay, enough of that shit. Is it fair to argue that to an extent these films are pandering to various sections of their potential viewership? Sure, absolutely. That goes without saying. But how is that a negative per se? Well, if it doesn't serve the story, if it doesn't fit, if it doesn't make sense, if it feels out of place, it's Hollywood. It must make money, otherwise it ceases to exist. So you're glorifying pandering to people. Pander for money because we're Hollywood simps right here. That none of us get any big new shiny American movies. Again, it's not on us to feel sympathetic towards them. You make a good product, people will like it, people will watch it. If you don't, they won't. Simple. When, since its inception, has Hollywood not pandered to the whims of the public? Arguably, it depends on, you can't just generalize like that, but any successful film or show gets a sequel. That's not true. I mean, did The Godfather pander? It portrayed, all Italians are mobsters by certain logic. Like, no, it was just a good, well-told story. How is that pandering? There's so many great movies. The Truman Show, that doesn't pander. Like, what do you mean? Is it just stories? If that didn't get a sequel, I guess, but it could have because it was so good. Then a prequel, then a sidequel, then a reboot. I don't know what point he's trying to make. He was just defending The Last Jedi and whatever. The story might not be interesting. He's even defending poor quality. I mean, you can see it right here. The story might not be interesting. The characters may commit moronic decision making, and the pace may be as slow as molasses, but a movie probably isn't terrible because gay co-lead is featured. So you just explain the issues that people would really care about, but then you bring up the identifier that you'll use to try to discredit them. It isn't terrible because of that, but you'll bring that up. This is why it's being disliked, bombed, quote unquote. All of these valid criticism, you're trying to subterfuge with your identifiers. What the platforms did about it. This is where things get dicey. For one, does review bombing carry enough sway for action to be taken against it? No, it does not. The question is not easy to answer, but the fact that you have to write a whole article about it to defend this one particular piece of fictional work by a major company tells you something, right? Did they pull their weight? Did they give you, look how hard he's trying to defend it. Just let it go. If people like it, they like it. If they don't, move on. One needs to consider how many people have utilized a given platform rating system, how many negative reviews there are vis-a-vis, and you're not questioning the positive ones. Like, there could be bots doing positive ones, there could be mindless fans doing it just for the sake of it. It goes both ways. What the comment sections read like is a big thing. You should look at what they see. If somebody puts a 1-star review and says this sucks, that's not very informative. It doesn't tell me anything. Whereas if somebody puts a 5-star review and gives me a paragraph explaining why it's good, that could hold more value. So you take it, again, not at face value. And above all else, do the ratings, however torrid, prevent a movie from earning money at the box office? That we've seen is not true. There are plenty of instances. The sequel trilogy is an example of that, or streaming a show from racking up a boast-worthy number of hours viewed. So again, that's what they should hang their hats on. They should say Rings of Power is good, so we're confident it'll succeed. We don't need to be so sensitive that I love how some of the most powerful, successful people and companies are the most sensitive of all. They can't take criticism at that level. What if it was my first movie ever? It was an indie movie that I made with my own money for, I make the Blair Witch Project and people are disliking it. They're dislike bombing it. I should feel honored that people are even aware of it in the first place, but it's like, I don't get that protection. I don't get to be sensitive in that case. So why do they? Amazon announced that the first 2 episodes of Rings of Power had 25 million viewers. Who watched all 2 hours and 10 minutes? We don't know. At least you point that out. That said, they're not in the habit of revealing viewers. Of course not. So they seem like they're happy, or they're trying to not seem bad. And yet they disallowed user ratings for 3 days. Something about the forcefulness and relative efficiency of review bombing. Forcefulness and efficiency. Well, it's efficient at what? Expressing dislike for something that you dislike? convince a company to temporarily shield itself. Oh yeah, they're the victims in this. This framing is fantastic. At the time, there was some tweet like that Elon Musk liked or responded to. Yeah, like the billion-dollar company calls you a racist for not liking its intellectual property, or the billion-dollar company has to punch down basically at ordinary people. It's the viewer's fault. It's the voter's fault. It's not the fault of what's being discussed. That's the weakest argument ever in anything. At the time of writing this, Rotten Tomatoes score is 39%, a steep hill to climb. But why does it have to? You're saying it like you have the horse in the race. Maybe it's just bad. Maybe that's where it belongs. Do only 4 out of 10 people think it's even passable? Perhaps, but it's difficult to say. There is some sort of internal contradiction with this too. Arguably, the rating for something is always going to be positive if you think about it, because the only people who are going to continue to watch it like seasons in, like let's say it's a 10-season show, all the ratings should be high because if you're going to watch it that far in, you evidently must like it. And if you don't like it, you'll just stop watching. So there is some fairness to this. Ratings are meaningless because those 39% people, so the 61 who didn't like it, are going to stop watching. So only the 39 will remain, and then it'll bolster up the rating, right? So there is something interesting to that. In any event, several companies have acted. Netflix doesn't allow star ratings anymore. I didn't even know that. I haven't used it in a while. Rotten Tomatoes doesn't allow any ratings for yet unreleased films. That is completely fair, right? Why would they? I think they always did that, as far as I can remember, or at least they should. I think IMDb, you could still do that, though. Epic Games concocted an altered version of the 5-star system to try and weed out outlandishly, ideologically motivated negative reviews. Again, I don't know what that means, ideologically motivated. The product itself could be ideologically motivated. The subject matter, the storytelling could be ideologically motivated. You're not the one who's doing it. They're doing it, and you're just reacting to it. So I don't get it. One extrapolates that as influential as these companies are, and as nice as it is to earn some Scrooge McDuck profits, not being eviscerated online for reasons at best tangentially related to the quality of their products offers peace of mind. I don't know, dude. I don't know what you're trying to argue for, because that happens with everything. If that wasn't nuanced enough for the reader's taste, not nuanced at all, really. There are arguments to be made, and that have been made, that user feedback is terrifically useful. It can be. I'm actually have the mindset that it's not useful at all. I just kind of go with what I want to do. Right? Like I said, I have the 25% rule. Like if it's within 70 to 100 rating, I'll consider it. If it's lower than that, I don't give it the benefit of the doubt. So if it's a 2 out of 10 average, I'll just assume, right, it's not worth checking out. And then you miss out on maybe stuff like The Room, but even that gets bolstered by, see, like you could look at that a weird way. It's not valid for The Room to have a good rating. What is it? I guess it doesn't have a good rating, actually. But let's say this had a high rating because so many people think its popularity is so high, so bad that it's good. Isn't that an invalid thing? It's not a reflection of its quality. It's a reflection of people's willingness or ability to find memes and humor in it, despite that. Like Nicolas Cage as an actor, summed up in one statement right there. Arguments to be made that it's terrifically useful. Deleting online feedback or outright avoiding the possibility of providing feedback runs the risk of the artist creators operating in a vacuum. Well, at least he's making the right point there. Believe it or not, there are academic studies about this. On one hand, it has been scientifically observed that in some circumstances, review bombing brings out, there's been studies on it because it's so common, right? And it matters. Extremist passions on both sides of the aisle. That can even happen if the original intent of bombing wasn't so that a forceful, equally passionate opposing side would arise in the comment section. Sooner or later, one is no longer really talking about it. There is a bit of false duality in that, sure, I could see that. On the flip side, as Professors Christian Morrow and James Burt of Australia's Bond University explain, online feedback in this day and age is a remarkable tool for developers in a video game context to ameliorate their product before it goes out for wide release. Yeah, that's why when they release it, it's still in a beta state where you still have to do the same. They worked on an educational game called The King's Request and put it on Steam. Yes, some reviews were needlessly negative. What is it needlessly part, though? Like, it sounds like you have a horse in the race of every single thing. Some things are just bad. Like, why? It's almost like he wants us to feel bad for them. Oh, it's boo-hoo for you. But other comments were astute and help guide the programmers to make a better game in the long run. That's what most of it is going to be. When prepping a video game, get feedback on a video game platform, go figure. No thumbs down on YouTube is one of the worst, dumbest pieces of shit ideas ever. Makes it harder to discern if a video is worth watching or not, regardless of how embarrassing the 2016 turmoil was. Well, why is it even embarrassing? I mean, people don't like the subject matter. Again, I'm not a fan of the preconceived stuff before it comes out, but people don't like what they feel like is being forced on them in a way that doesn't feel organic to the story. While the academically based examples above pertain to video games, it is a regular fact. The fact is, regular people still consider movie and TV show ratings, just as some still base viewing choices on what earned an Academy Award or an Emmy. I don't know too many people who do that. Some people don't, some do. Well, then let them make up their mind too. make up your own dang mind about whether you like or dislike it, but then get censored for it. Read it like that. It goes without saying that the simplest, truest form of knowing whether something satisfies is by giving it a try. But then the trick with that is, again, you're giving them money for something that might feel in retrospect they don't deserve. There are many people who don't give a fiddler's flute about what the consensus says about Michael Bay Transformers. Yeah, they made a lot of money. They want to see if the next one is good, just as good as the last one. Anyways, individuals are up for conversation, or any type of moderately deeper reflection can compare what they think about a movie with others with what they indicate they hold value. Okay? Final say is about how dangerous, harmful, or inconsequential review bombing is. It seems pretty inconsequential to me. What's the worst case you're going to do? Cost $1 billion company a few $1 million and for a reason that you don't like something? Because all likes and dislikes are arbitrary, unless, again, you're accompanied by a written review that makes some good points, which is the only thing you should care about anyway. So by that logic, you could say, why not just remove all reviews? But by that logic, just leave them, all the numbers and the figures and the stars, because take it with a grain of salt and read what they say along with it. If it just says it sucks, then discredit it. Depends on who's noticing it. Any person with minimal intelligence can, unlike you, can ponder about a movie sporting a 50% or 2.5 rating. Yeah, see, that's outside of my 25 threshold. Half of the people like this movie, other half don't. That doesn't mean it's bad. So that's why you shouldn't feel threatened by rating. Am I in the mood to say I take a 50-50 chance? It's not complicated. I always bring up Signs for that because that's more like a 5.9, but it's one of my favorite movies ever. As for the studios and game developers, it is understandably a different story. They work tirelessly. Yeah, again, you're doing it from a sympathetic framing. Everybody worked tirelessly. So does that mean that their work is automatically good? Or let's say you don't work tirelessly, they're lazy, but the product is good and everybody loves it, even if they did it half-ass. If it comes out good, so be it. To put out what they hopefully believe is a good product. It must be frustrating to witness relatively small. Why are you framing it like it's small? If it's small, then it wouldn't be this big of a deal, would it? There must be an even smaller group that actually likes it because they don't counteract it, or again, maybe they don't use the review stuff. But somehow annoyingly efficient group. What? I don't know. Overall rating, bring it down for reasons beyond how good it is. Again, what does that mean? What other reason is there? Reputations must preserve their luster. As such, some of them decide to control the feedback with forcefulness. As previously argued, that can have some negative effects. It's only negative. By shutting them up, people who depend on such ratings are kept in the dark. And then people will do it just to stick it to you. Like, what did they say with Blizzard? Delete this, Blizzard, middle finger, when they were deleting comments on Diablo Immortal or something. There's also the matter of people who didn't care for the movie for perfectly legitimate reasons, not having a platform to express themselves. When it gets to that point, the review bombers have A-bombed everyone, including themselves. So how about just don't remove it and let people use their brains?